Welcome back, fellas. We are back with my beautiful crystal Xbox. This will be the second time that you guys see this Xbox. If it's your first time here, I'll go ahead and link that video for you guys. We essentially started with a completely dead Xbox and we managed to get it working in the last episode. Turned out it just needed a recap, primarily because of failing caps underneath the CPU. Most of those capacitors were either bulging or leaking. Once we were able to test the system out, we realized that the DVD drive doesn't work. The tray just refuses to open. Not an uncommon issue with these. The belts just completely dry out and they just need to be replaced. We have quite a bit of work ahead of us today. I'll be removing the 220 volt power supply that came with this console, and I'll be installing a 110 volt replacement. And we'll be recapping that power supply before we install it as well. Once we have a native 110 volt Xbox, we'll need to do the NTSC conversion. And given this is a 1.6 version motherboard, it's the least mod friendly. So we're gonna have to rebuild the LPC port, install a mod chip, and then we can attempt to make changes to the EEPROM to convert it to NTSC, which will enable those advanced HD modes that natively come with NTSC Xboxes. Let's go ahead and start with the power supply so that I no longer have to use that big and bulky voltage transformer just to power this guy up. We now have a fully recapped 110 volt power supply for this Xbox. Now, just to compare this to the 220 volt version, these are both Delta D power supplies. That's model number 96DP. And the 220 volt version is 96DP/1. So the /1 designates that it's a European 220 volt version. There are reports online of people converting a 110 volt Xbox power supply to 220 volts and vice versa. I didn't find anything like that for the Delta D. I found it for some older versions of the Xbox power supply, and I'm not sure I would ever feel comfortable doing something like that. When you're dealing with high voltage, you really have to know what you're doing before you start just swapping components around and hoping for the best. Several of these capacitors just have completely different values, and some components are just completely missing altogether. So if you look at this component in blue up front, it's almost double the size, physically speaking, compared to the 220 volt version. Over here, you have two passive components, and you only have one in this version over here. Not to mention just the size of the actual transformer is larger on the 110 and smaller on the 220. So I'm just speaking for myself here, but not something I feel comfortable doing. I'm sure someone out there has figured out how to do it, but when you're working with high voltage stuff, I don't see the point in taking the risk. Just buy a replacement power supply, recap it, and you practically have a brand new power supply for your Xbox. It's just not worth messing around with high voltage unless you really know exactly what you're doing. All right, let's take care of the optical drive next. We'll give this guy a new belt and lubricate all the moving parts, and hopefully we'll have a working drive. Next up, let's go ahead and reapply the thermal paste, and then we'll move on to the mod chip installation. And that's looking really good. Let's go ahead and rebuild the LPC port next in preparation for the mod chip installation. I'm going to be using something called an LPC rebuild kit. The board that I purchased is known as the LPC Corrector version 4. It's made by a very well-known and respected member of the Xbox modding scene. He goes by Kukul from over on at Chimeric Systems. And I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description below if you want to get your hands on one of his LPC rebuild boards. All right, guys, we are done, and that is looking absolutely amazing. All the joints look good, nice and shiny, and I think everything lined up really well. Now, when it comes to installing a mod chip, there's the issue of grounding D0. D0 is what tells your Xbox to boot from the LPC port, and it's a little bit unique for the 1.6 as well. So you can ground D0 directly on the LPC rebuild kit right here, just by bridging these two pads. Or you could just take D0 from the left pad right here, wrap it around the board, and ground it to the D0 pad on the mod chip. On the 1.6, if you have no use for the onboard bias, then we can go ahead and sever a trace called LFRAME, and we can grab that trace from the corner of this chip right here. If you sever LFRAME, you don't have to worry about D0 or grounding D0. The Xbox will just always boot from the LPC port. Now, everything that I'm sharing is specific to the mod chip that I plan to install, and that's the Aladdin XT+2. Other mod chips can properly deal with D0 and LFRAME on a 1.6. You don't have to sever any traces. You can wire both D0 and LFRAME to your XBlast Aladdin or to your Open Xenium, and those mod chips will properly deal with that signal. This mod chip's not nearly as intelligent, so you sever LFRAME and the system will just always boot from the mod chip. Let's sever that trace and then we'll go ahead and install the mod chip. And we are done. Let's go ahead and install the Aladdin, and we'll fire this thing up and test it out. These Aladdins have been getting a bad reputation recently for being fake. People are buying them, they're trying to flash or update the BIOS on them, and the Xbox will just refuse to flash it. And it's not that these chips are fake. Any Aladdin that you've bought in the last 10 years is a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone. It just so happens that the most recent iteration of these use a chip that has a different manufacturer ID, a different chip ID, as I understand it, and the Xbox just doesn't recognize it and refuses to flash it. So it's not that it's fake per se. You can still flash a 256K BIOS on it. You just have to do it using an external programmer. Now, that's not necessarily a concern for me for this project. This mod chip still comes with the latest version of EvoX. That's the BIOS I was planning to use on this build anyway. This is a 1.6, and at least at the time of making this video, other BIOSes that I might consider using, like SirBIOS, for example, don't yet support the 1.6. So for $12, this is going to do everything that I needed to do out of the box, and I can always flash it manually in the future if I want to. So just wanted to address that. I know that some people might have questions about why I like using these mod chips, and that's my reasoning for it. Okay, I'm going to clear the desk, set up for video capture, and then we'll hook this guy up and test it out. When we did the repair on this console in the last video, people were wondering why the IDE cable was so yellow. This is a surplus cable I have from an Xbox that I've already modded, and this is what it should look like. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's because it's a transparent shell and more light can get through, or it has something to do with the air quality and maybe the previous owner was a smoker or something like that. But I'll install one of the nicer looking ones, given that we're mostly going to keep this unit stock. I'm not doing a hard drive upgrade or anything like that on this unit just yet. On all my other Xboxes, there's a metal grounding plate that kind of goes over the DVD drive before you slot it down. This one just doesn't have it. I don't know if it's because it's a European Xbox or because it's a 1.6. All right, guys, let's go ahead and hook this guy up. I forgot something very important, the fan. All right, well, glad we didn't turn that guy on. Let's install the fan. This is a hobby for those who are patient. If you're not patient, don't even bother doing this kind of work. It's just going to frustrate you. All right. Power. Record. And turn it on. Evo X logo. So the LPC port installation and the mod chip, all that went good. So we have a controller and I have my OG Xbox installer disk. So let's see if the drive's working. Nice. All right, let's shut this guy off and start it back up, and it should boot straight into OG Xbox installer. We're in OG Xbox installer, and if you pay attention to the top right, you can see it says Xbox V1.6 Video PAL. Now, this is where I was confused about converting a 1.6 to NTSC, because I was under the impression that you can't write to the EEPROM in a 1.6, and apparently people are still using tools like Enigma and even XBlast OS to switch the video mode to PAL. So let's try it. I'm going to use XBlast OS just because I'm a little bit more familiar with it, and here that's going to be in the BIOS section because that's what people mostly use XBlast for. Let's go down to BIOS Tools. And let's launch XBlast OS. Okay, we're in XBlast OS. Let's go to Settings. Let's go to Info and just see what it says for the EEPROM. Video PAL. Okay, let's go back and let's go to System Settings. Let's go to Game Region. It looks like DVD region is already clear. So here we have different DVD regions. I'm assuming that's for movie playback. Not sure. Let's go to Game Region, change Game Region, hold down LT, RT, Start, and White. So it's doing something. It's flashing red and yellow over here. Let's see what happens. I've been waiting for 2 to 3 minutes and nothing's changed. And it's always nerve-wracking when you're working with these flash tools and you don't get the expected result. So I'm going to power this guy down. Let's power it up and see what happens. That weird video is just my capture card adjusting to the PAL signal. It usually just takes a second for it to figure everything out. We're back in OG Xbox installer and it's still saying Video PAL. So let's try Enigma and see if we have better luck there. So live applications, switch NTSC PAL video mode. And there's an info file and Enigma. Let's open up Enigma. All right, press A for PAL, press B for NTSC. Let's press B for NTSC. And how do we save? Do we just restart? Hello. I guess we just turn it off and back on. Let's try that. NTSC M, it worked. Nice. All right, I guess there's nothing left to do but hook this guy up to some component cables and see if we're getting those advanced HD modes. And we could also try it out with some NTSC discs and make sure it's reading US games. Alrighty fellas, we have the Xbox hooked up to the HD TV over component cables. Now if we look at the resolution up here, it's running in 480i. So that's the default. Now if we go to settings, video, and we have all the HD modes. So I'm going to enable 480p and 720p. Now if we look at the resolution up here, we can see it's running in 720p HD. So we are getting native HD resolutions out of this console. For all intents and purposes, this is now a US NTSC Xbox. I'm really proud of where we reached with this project. When we started out in the last episode, we had a completely dead Xbox. It had bulging and leaking caps on the motherboard, and a recap managed to bring it back to life. And in this episode, we repaired the DVD drive by replacing the drive belt. We gave it new thermal paste. We recapped and installed a 110 volt power supply, and we rebuilt the LPC port and hard modded the system with an Aladdin mod chip. So now that the system's both region free and it's been switched over to NTSC, it has all those advanced HD modes that are absent from PAL consoles. So this is now a native NTSC US Xbox. Now, it's not going to be lost on you guys that I've left the system mostly stock, and that's because I've pretty recently built my ultimate Xbox. That's the Xbox Surbias project. That's the system that's currently hooked up to my TV. I play it all the time. It has all the games that I'll ever want to play, and I think that's about the coolest thing that you can do with your Xbox right now. So if you haven't seen that video, feel free to check it out. But I don't see the point in reproducing that project with this system, just given how recently I put that system together. So until something new comes out, which it will, the Xbox modding scene is alive and kicking. So this will be a good candidate for something new when it comes out. I know some people are going to ask about the HDMI mod as well. And I do think that's a cool mod for the system, just not something that I'm personally too interested in, at least not yet. The TV in my game room, it accepts component inputs. The system outputs analog HD natively, and I enjoy playing it that way just fine. So I don't see a huge value add for my gaming setup to have an Xbox that's outputting HDMI, but I do see why that's a really cool and desirable mod for a lot of you out there. But if there's a particular mod out there that you guys think would be cool to do with the system, definitely let me know. I'm open to it. That's what the system's here for. But if nothing else, I'll just keep an eye out on all the developments in the modding scene, and this system will be a good guinea pig for something like that in the future. Alrighty, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this project, and I will see you guys again soon. Take care.